All right. Well, I will start by saying that I love talking to pediatricians. I am a pediatrician. And then I know one of you said you're a neurologist. I am married to a neurologist. So definitely familiar with both of those. So I can share my screen.
At the bottom, there's like a little square that goes up. Yeah.
Okay. Can you guys see my screen?
I do. I want to say that these are beautiful slides. I love the
thank
color.
you.
I don't know if you paid someone to do them. They're very professional looking. Yeah.
I used AI.
Yeah, they look really good.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So I will get started. I'm Allison. I'm a pediatric emergency physician. I'll share a little bit about my journey as a part of these slides, but my goal here is to really create some options for you guys to realize some pathways that you can take to use the clinical expertise that you have, that every single one of you has 20 plus years of expertise when you think of all the training, all the school you went to, and all the patient care you've done. And I want you to first realize how valuable your clinical expertise is. And then second, learn about some pathways to actually start a paid advisory practice. So I will keep going. So we're going to talk about 3 different pathways that physicians can use to drive innovation beyond clinical practice. The top 3 mistakes that I see people make and how to avoid these. And then my kind of 5-step framework of how to think through what does it take to get started to get into paid advisor work with the venture and startup space. I will share with you some pricing frameworks that I use about how you can expect to price some of this work. And then I am all about taking action. I think that showing up and making connections and listening to things is great, but I really would love to give you guys some options of things you could do right away to get started. And I really, again, want to encourage you that while we all feel some of the pressure and angst that I heard at least one of you describing with working in a very broken system, like a very broken system, and how overwhelming that can feel when truly all you're trying to do is serve your patients. But I want to encourage you that there are so many abundant opportunities. I think that we all have the power and capability to design the life we want. And we have a lot of skills and just sometimes don't know the pathway. So I am, you know what? Let me just say something really quick. Let me just stop sharing for just seconds. I think I had another version of these slides that that had been updated. Sorry, give me 1 second. I should have. Okay, here we go. Sorry, I edited these slides to get a special thing for you guys. But I was like, wait, this looks like the old version. Okay. Let me just share these new slides. But the point is still the same, that we want to really get into what does it mean to be a startup advisor? Because before I got involved in startups, I didn't know anyone in startups. I wouldn't have known what that was. And some people wonder, like, is this something that fits me or my skill set? And quite honestly, it doesn't matter what your specialty is, whether you're practicing currently, whether you're board certified, what your residency training is. Startups are really hiring physicians for their clinical expertise, not what you're doing right now. And so the qualities that it takes are, a willingness to be a beginner. A lot of this is about mindset. So like willingness to be a beginner and realize that, you feel like intern all over again sometimes, but the confidence to put yourself out there and recognize that your skill set is really valuable. You have to be curious about the business side of things and willing to learn. And I think it requires resilience because, you have a lot of setbacks, and you guys are entrepreneurs. You're in this group. I'm sure we've all had our fair share of setbacks that were actually learning experiences. So just to share a little bit about me, I am a practicing pediatric emergency physician. I still see patients. I worked in the ER last weekend. It is so important to me to be a practicing doctor because I feel like it's really part of my calling. I love taking care of kids and their families. I think it is such a privilege. I have 4 kids myself. And as I mentioned, my husband is a neurologist. So we did the dual physician, both in training, having a ton of babies and the stress of the system. And I certainly remember times that I would have told you that my biggest dream for my career was that I was going to sleep at night every night. Like that I would have reached the pinnacle of my career when I get to sleep at night, but like every night. And like my friends that I tell that to, they're like, that is a really low bar. Like, but I have a very bizarre journey that I ended up going on and working at a private equity firm and building a multi-9-figure health tech startup that was completely unexpected, but I learned a lot, which is what I want to share with you. And I've gone on to start multiple other healthcare ventures, and I've helped raise over $100 million for the companies that I support. So I'm very deeply embedded in the venture world now, and I find it so exciting and inspiring. And I love working with founders. I think they're the most optimistic people I've ever met. And so I'd love to share more of that with you. But everything that I've ever done really stems directly out of the patient care that I provide and the clinical cases that I've experienced. And I remember being a fellow, and we covered the ER transfer center for like a 5-state region. And I remember this rural hospital calling and saying, like, we've got this kid, he's really sick. We don't know what's wrong. We have to get him to peds as fast as possible. We're putting him on a helicopter. And like, that was the solution. That was what we need to do to get pediatric expertise. And they put him on this helicopter, and I mean, I had no way to give them any advice. We had no vitals. We had no exam. They didn't really have much of a history. And it was a 2-year-old, and he had an unrecognized head injury, and he herniated on that flight. And I remember feeling like this was such a senseless loss. Like, this was someone's child. And if only I could have been able to see him, I might have been able to provide some support, some guidance, some temporizing measures. I mean, it's kind of giving me PTSD because I had a kid herniate in my ER this weekend. And so it was just made me realize, I was like, why are we not using telehealth in peds? Like, this is so obvious. I mean, I could have just, the technology is available. And it became very clear to me as I went down this pathway that some of the reasons why we don't use certain new technologies has nothing to do with how accessible the technology is, or whether a workflow could work, or whether it could be safe. It has to do with the fact that it's not paid for. There was no payment for telehealth. People were concerned for liability. There was no policy or best practices around it. And there was no policy because there was no evidence base. And there was no evidence base because nobody was doing it. And so I really felt very frustrated because I had a lot of big ideas. And then I also remember being like, oh, I want to like really study social determinants of health. I want to try and understand what makes people go to the ER, like what supports are missing from our society that make people go to the ER when they really don't need to be in the emergency department. And my fellowship director was like, you're never going to solve that problem. You need to accept this as part of our specialty, or else you're going to burn out. Like, and he basically told me, like, don't do a research project on that. And so I remember thinking, like, the system is kind of broken and unflexible. I ended up starting my first venture as a fellow called Sprout. It was a multi-center, it was a nonprofit multi-center research network. That actually was great. It helped me get pathways to, I wrote national policy on telehealth and got really involved in more of the health tech side of things, but still very academic. And then I took a role at a large nonprofit hospital system in the Midwest that I was overseeing our virtual care programs. Because again, I was very interested and focused on telehealth and how could we use some of this technology to actually change the way we delivered care. And one of the core programs that I developed was for children with medical complexity. So this also came directly out of my clinical practice, that I knew there were so many kids that just had so much trouble navigating the system because of the complexity of their medical needs. Very small proportion of kids that account for a huge amount of the pediatric costs, and really amenable to a population health model. So I built this program. It was like very one-by-one growth. I was running a complex care clinic with a very small team that we were doing primarily virtual care for. I mean, these kids had trachs and vents and G-tubes. We ended up with about 200 kids in the program. And I did a research study on it and showed that we, just by providing more support to these families, we were able to reduce their ER visits by 50% and their hospitalizations by 35%. So massive clinical outcome from just supporting families more. And it made no money. So we were funded by, grant, like innovation funding, and COVID hit, and with they closed surgeries for like 2 weeks in the hospital. The whole system ran out of money. And so we literally, our system laid off like 7,000 people in May of 2020. And all of these kids that we had been supporting lost access to those resources. And then every time I worked in the ER, I saw these patients in person, and they were struggling. Their families were struggling, and they, again, it was just very disappointing because I felt like we had really created something special. It was a very deeply emotional program too, because I was very, very deeply involved, not just in their clinical care, but in supporting their families. Caregiver fatigue is just like such a real thing. And these parents just, their stories are heartbreaking. And, they finally felt like they had someone to support them and their child, and then it got taken away. And I was upset about it, but I also was like, what can I learn from this? How do I need to pivot? And the person who later became a co-founder, she was in the tech space. She had helped me run the program. She was like, well, why don't we just start this on our own? And I was like, I don't know how to do that. Like, I don't know anything about startups. So we got some coaching and realized that we actually had a really valuable idea and really good experience. And I ended up getting a LinkedIn message in 2021 from this firm in Nashville that was like, really, really well-respected healthcare private equity firm that was doing discovery on the concept of supporting complex kids for a number of reasons. But they found our paper and they reached out, and we ended up quitting our jobs, my co-founder and I, and our husbands, and we all moved to Nashville to incubate this concept at a firm. And I literally felt like I had been picked up out of the ER in Missouri and like dropped into this private equity firm. I didn't know what anyone was talking about. I knew a lot about the clinical side of things, but we incubated the company for about a year, and I learned so much about what it takes to de-risk a concept, to get it off the ground and really get all the variables worked out and pre-sell it. We got a contract with United Healthcare in Texas for over 10,000 kids before we had a single employee. Like, we literally closed the deal and we're like, well, we better go hire some people because we're starting in 3 months. So we launched in 2023. Imagine grew to a multi-9-figure valuation in just 2 years. We are now, I can't even keep up with how many states we're in, 10 or 14 or something. And we are caring for close to 100,000 high needs kids on Medicaid. And I'm just going to say they are killing it. The model, it's working. They are providing so much support to all these families and outperforming everything. I'm like, oh man, like, we just proved you can create value in pediatrics. So I know there's some pediatricians on this call, and we are not usually the first ones considered for innovation funding. But my goal was to build $1 billion pediatric company to draw more, investors to the pediatric market. So we are expected to make a 10-figure exit in the next couple of years. I moved into more of an advisory role and founded my own venture advisory firm where I really loved the incubation period. So I work with a lot of firms on their early stage concepts and go-to-market strategy. I act as a fractional chief medical officer for some early companies and one later stage company. And then I do, just some advisory work with other startups. And along the way, I actually got a lot of doctors asking me, like, how do I become an advisor? Or, hey, I have this idea that I really think could become a startup, but I don't know anyone that does that sort of thing. And so I used to just like try and give everyone my Calendly link. And I very quickly realized like, I really need to create something that can help guide physicians along this pathway. So I kind of like accidentally started another organization out of necessity, which is called Startup Physicians. I started with a podcast and then created a course, and now we're launching our first incubator cohort. So that was really my journey. But the reason I tell you my story is because I think you can probably see a lot of parallels to what you do, maybe a little bit of burnout, maybe a little bit of, feeling setbacks, or like your ideas aren't taking root and growing, or maybe you're in the wrong place. Like I definitely got the sensation on multiple occasions that I was in the wrong place. And it matters right now because things are changing really fast. Like the rate of change in healthcare is going to be pretty uncomfortable over the next few years. And I want to see doctors leading it. I want to see doctors at the table when it comes to training AI models on the safety and quality. I mean, because I've been on the other side of this, and I know that like, I'd rather have y'all over here than a bunch of investment bankers and tech bros making these decisions. So your clinical expertise, it really is the missing piece. And I really encourage physicians to focus on, as your core quality, safety, and health equity. Like, how can you bring that lens to all the work that you're doing? And it's really expanding your impact. You don't have to leave medicine. I mean, you can if you want to, but I didn't. But it's about expanding your impact. And I really would love to see more doctors have this one-to-many impact. I mean, I don't even work at I like my involvement with Imagine at this point is the quarterly board meeting, and I'm not even there day to day. And there are 100,000 high need kids on Medicaid getting this profound care because of something that I had an idea about and then had the support and guidance to make it happen. So I definitely did not expect that, but I want you to be encouraged that whether you have an idea that you want to develop, that you really think you know how to solve a problem for your patients, or if you have some passions of like, these are some things I'd love to work on. I want you to know there's a lot of people building businesses. I get a lot of people saying like, oh, well, is it possible that there's an opportunity? And I'm like, there's like millions of opportunities. And so anything you could think of, like they're building companies about. And so going into the mistakes and how to avoid them. So the number one thing I see from doctors is a lack of confidence. So they don't really truly understand the value of their clinical expertise. And I think that we have a lot of imposter syndrome because we think that we have to go to school for 20 years to be able to start something, like to get started in a field. And that's just like not how it works over here. A lot of your skills are translatable. The second mistake I see is like being too rigid. So I teach a lot on design thinking and how to be agile. I mean, I'm pretty flexible about pretty much everything in my concepts, unless it's quality, safety, or health equity. So all the other pieces I'm very open-minded about. We are trained to be pretty hierarchical and rigid. And so we have to kind of let go of some of the ways we think. And we have to let go of our pride. Like, you might have been practicing for 20 years, but you will feel like an intern the first time you go to pitch, or, the first time you try to, sell your advisory services or whatever. It feels weird to do something for the first time. But that's how you get experience. You're really, really good at learning. And then the other thing I see is that people give up too soon. So they think like, oh, well, I did this thing and I should be able to make all these results immediately. I mean, just like being an intern, I mean, it's a stair step. You get some foundational skills, you get some foundational experience, and then you do the next thing and the next thing, but you're gathering skills into your kind of toolkit as you take on more arrangements, and you'll get very comfortable in this space and realize how much you have to offer and how much opportunity there is. And so I obviously encourage you to recognize your value, and you can really, a lot of clinical skills do translate. I have several tools that I help people with that, I want you to think about almost like a skills inventory. So I think this is on a different slide that I gave to another group. One is your clinical skills. That's the first thing you're going to think of. So you'll be like, oh, I'm a retinal surgeon. So it's like, I have had people that are like, I work on like the tiniest part of the body. And I'm like, okay, well, then you probably also did a full ophthalmology, thing. And you obviously are a surgeon. So you also have expertise in, I'm sure you did like an internal medicine year. So you have some clinical expertise, not just in your very, very subspecialized area. You have some broader clinical expertise. Next is your systems expertise. Like that's the one that I think a lot of people overlook, is like, how an OR runs, how billing works, how people get referred to you, how patients move through the system in your space. There's a ton of system skills that we kind of take for granted. We kind of think everyone knows these things, but I mean, I've literally worked with clients and like mapped out how triage works in an ER, and they're like, I had no idea. And I'm like, I don't know how you didn't know that, but a lot that they don't know. And third, I would say, is like your like leadership and credibility. Like you can't be a healthcare company going like in front of a payer without a doctor. Like you need to have the credibility of a clinical person behind you. So recognizing your value. So I kind of went off script and was describing a slide that's not in this deck, but recognizing that you have more skill sets than just your clinical skills. And then embrace the curiosity. You got to balance the fact that like, yes, you're an expert, don't undervalue yourself, but also let's be humble and realize we're learning something new. Adopt a learner's mindset. You are an incredible learner, and you want to seek knowledge that's, in new domains. And then build resilience. So I have had a lot of things in my career that could be considered failures, but instead it really, to me, felt like just a stepping stone or a learning experience. You need to develop a strong support systems. Groups like this, like I love participating in this Facebook group because it's very uplifting. Like I feel like I can't fathom anyone in this group putting someone else down or taking advantage of them. Like it's just so important to find peers that have your back and are rooting for you. And so these are kind of my 5 steps. First, you want to make sure you have the foundation and the mindset. I think it's really important to ask why. What's your why? For me, it's usually based on like a clinical experience. Like what makes you want to work in this space? Like what are the problems in healthcare that you're really interested in solving? That will help you to later find these opportunities. But you want to start with like, what are the problems you're interested in helping solve? And then you want to quantify your value and really create your narrative. Like, who are you? What are you bringing to the table? What's your story? In the venture space, we meet so many people. So like, how do you make yourself memorable? And then you want to align that as a value proposition. So what is it that startups actually need? Like, what would be a real ROI for them to bring you on as an advisor? So that's part of why I do so much work in the growth and go-to-market space, because if you can tie what you're doing directly to them getting contracts or growing their revenue, like it's a no-brainer. So you have to understand what they need. And as part of that, you need to understand the startup life cycle and where they are in their funding. And you may have to start with some engagements that are not as much cash pay up front. But the whole point of startups is like they're all expected to grow. They should have cash at some point. Now, I know a lot of startups fail, but the majority of them will, a lot of them will get some funding and get going. And if they have a good model, which you can assess, I always build it into my contracts if I'm starting with a company as like an equity only advisor, that as soon as they raise money or close a contract, that we'll start doing a retainer payment as well. So next, you want to build your pipeline. So you want to identify people to do outreach to. That sounds intimidating, but I think that, you can search for all sorts of concepts and companies, venture firms, people that are doing things that are related to that why that you identified, really identifying founders to connect with, product people. I do a lot of this on LinkedIn, and I actually, work with people and give them an AI tool that'll build them an entire playbook and then create a customized outreach list of like 40 to 70 companies. And you don't have to go sell to them. Just go connect with them, connect with their founders, tell them you like what they're doing. As founders, we get a lot of negative feedback. So it's like so nice when somebody's like, hey, I love your concept. It's like, wow, that's so nice. And so building your network in the right direction is super important. And then you have to identify which of those people actually align with a phase of their business that aligns with one of the services you want to offer, and really deliver value. And so being an advisor for a startup, there are some things beyond just like, okay, it's a side, it's first off, it's not passive income. So some people do like real estate and stuff like that. That's passive. This is not passive. This is a side gig, but it's creative. I mean, I feel like I never felt like in the traditional setting, I was like, it was very appreciated to be creative, and I am a very creative person. It's intellectually stimulating. I think that the fact that these startups, the goal is to scale them and to actually really affect a lot of patients is very motivating. And it can help you with designing your career. And so I want to offer another resource, which is on my website. But I think beyond just knowing your skills, you actually have what I would call an archetype. So ways that you specifically want to work. And so I kind of define these on my own because I realized that some of the doctors I work with, they would love a role to like help with business development and networking and like connecting the founders with a bunch of doctors and things like that. And others would be like, whoa, I do not want to do that. And then others would love to do a research study, and then some would be like, oh my God, I left academics because I don't want to do research. So I have a guide on my website. I think I have a QR code at the end here that you can download that goes through what I consider like the 8 different flavors of consulting. And you might be good at 4 or 5 of them, but it's good to know what you like and what you don't like. I do a lot of strategy work. So things like clinical strategy, care model design, more with like an executive team to really bring in that clinical lens. If you like to build things, if you actually, I've done a lot of co-development of software. So working with tech teams, product development, really bringing in the clinical perspective, especially if you work with tools like this and you understand like how your clinic works or how something needs to work. The Guardian is really what I consider this quality and safety. I mean, it's really all about, and we have to have more of us over in this space with all these AI tools. It's like, I'm very open to see how we can use technology to improve healthcare, but it needs to be safe and the right people need to be guarding it. The translator, I think of like, we're constantly trying to translate very complex clinical reasoning and stuff to terms that patients can understand. Same thing is needed when you're working with like payers or, all sorts of different, or maybe direct to consumer, or maybe you're talking to, self-insured employers. You need to be able to help translate these clinical skills. The scientists, I do a lot of this work where it's like research study design, because early stage companies, they need to validate their model. They need to validate that what they built actually works. The connector is like, I mean, you just have to realize that let's say somebody, their primary plan to grow their company is to get in front of like 50 OBGYNs and that's going to be like their network growth plan. If that founder were, if you're an OB-GYN and that founder were to reach out to like 100 practices, like they may get like a 5 or 10% response rate because they're just some random person, you know, who's like trying to sell something. If you as an OBGYN use your network and your connections and or just like call the office or email them, you are so much more likely to be able to get that connection and get them in front of the right people. So that can be a fun role. The educator, if they need you to like teach at conferences or present for them. And then the operator, this is more of like a fractional CMO role. Clinical operations, like you can take a model, like a business model and be like, oh, great, we got funding for this. And then you get people show up that need to do the job. You need these to be translated into actual clinical workflows. Like what exactly is everyone going to be doing at every point? And so I'm going to very briefly go over kind of what sort of pricing models I use and that I teach. I think these are reasonable. I have the disclaimer that, you know, everyone kind of starts at a different point. I think if you start with pricing that's lower and get some experience and even in just one job, 1 or 2 engagements, it's easier to close an engagement if you have a clear understanding of exactly what you're going to deliver. But as you take on more roles, you will get more skills and it will be a lot easier to verbalize what your value is and to close deals. So first off is more like project-based work or consulting. Expert network calls. I also just made a guide on this. And again, at the end, I'll give you a QR code that has all my free resources. But I made a guide of all the expert networks that I would recommend and how you might want to position yourself on them. I would say these might be higher end prices. I think I would just start at saying your rate is $500 an hour because you can estimate that they will talk to you for 1 hour. Like it is not an ongoing engagement. I have charged more when people are wanting payer advice because it's like, I guess, higher value advice because they want to figure out how to get payer contracts that might be worth 8 or 9 figures. And so will they pay me $1,000 to hear about that? Yes, they will. So there's like, I don't know, 8 or 10 networks that I listed on this guide that you can use AI to create a really good profile and your how you would describe your skills, and then just list it there. Like you don't have to check on it. They will reach out to you if they have an opportunity for you. So you don't have to go out and do business development. I like project-based stuff more than hourly stuff when it comes to consulting because I just don't think the hourly model aligns with the incentives. So I do not think that the value that we bring to any project is based on the number of minutes we spend doing it. And I think that I've done a lot of hourly contracts and I stopped doing them completely. It disincentivizes them to like talk to you. So like, I know that I don't talk to my lawyer a whole lot. I try and get really prepared before I send him stuff. And when I talk to him, I try and make it short because I'm like, he is billing me by the minute. But I like project-based work because you can define a scope. I like to do like a smaller project for people to get started, or maybe even consider a pro bono project to gain trust and build relationships. I have done things that are, you know, maybe a few hours of work that I'll offer to a founder for a couple $1,000s because I know as a founder, it's a lot easier to say yes to a one-time cost than an ongoing like monthly charge because you're talking about cash flow. So larger consulting projects, when you become more experienced, like building out an entire quality program or a total clinical workflow design can be more. But I generally move towards more of like a retainer model. If you're on advisory boards, which meet quarterly and are not governing boards, so you don't have like liability. You're really in an advisory position. Some of them will offer equity, especially earlier on. And then I'm on some that offer cash pay as well, and sometimes in the $10,000 to $20,000 a year range for 4 meetings quarterly, and then being available in between for advice. It's a great way to get started because it's just a lot kind of lower touch, and you can get some experience. As far as like strategic advisory work that's internal, I kind of differentiate like internal versus externally facing. I start with internal work, even if I'm being recruited to be more of like a fractional executive or externally facing, because I really want to know the inner workings of the company and know if it's something I want to put my face on. So I'm willing to do more strategy work internally. And I usually start those at $5,000 a month, and, working with their internal teams. If they're going to be using my name and likeness and using my credibility to build their business, I start at 10. And then if they want me to actually be their fractional CMO, I think it depends on what sort of FTE you're talking about, but you can ask for more. And those are cash prices. Now, a lot of times they will want to give some combination of cash plus equity. Companies that are a little further along, they won't want to give equity. They'll want to only give cash, and then people will be sometimes negotiating to try and get equity. That's a whole nother thing that we cover in my course, but those are very you want to assess all those situations individually. I can't give like blanket advice about it, other than if you're being offered equity, I always try to convert it to a cash value and think how I feel about it in my head. So if they are, if you need to know how they've valued their business. So if they've recently fundraised and maybe they were worth $10 million or something like that, and they've recently fundraised, that's a pretty good marker. And then if they're offering you like 0.2% or something like that, you calculate. And I hate when I say math questions out loud in my head. I have to figure it out. I'm like, I shouldn't have said actual numbers, but let's say you calculated, it's like, what's this percentage of this number? That's about $50,000 or $20,000. Then you look at the scope and you can actually calculate is that about if what they're asking me to do is about, 50 hours of work, and they're offering me equity that's theoretically worth this amount. So if you calculate it and it comes out to be like $30 an hour, don't do that. And you have to know why they value it a certain way. I've had founders that have not raised any money, but they have this number in their head of what they think it's going to be worth. And it's like, yeah, that's not real. You can't value it that way yet. And I've had people that wanted these massive scopes of work, more than I do as a CMO. And they wanted to give me this tiny piece of equity with no cash. And I had to be like, that's it's really not it doesn't fit. So equity can get kind of complicated, but I just wanted you guys to see that this is things that I see in the market that I think are very reasonable, but you won't start there. The thing I would recommend for getting started is actually start with it's easy enough to just go ahead and put your name and profile on the expert networks, because especially if anyone's in oncology, I see a huge demand for oncology advice. And you don't have to go do business development. That's the part that most doctors hate, is doing their networking and selling their own services. If you start with that, that's easy, because you don't have to market yourself. They'll be like, hey, we have this project. Are you a fit? Show up at this time. And then they send you money afterwards. Next, I would think about entry projects or advisory roles. You really need to craft what is it that you can do for them? And again, would you be willing to do it for a pro bono, for an early stage founder or something like that, to get experience? Again, swallowing your pride and recognizing that you probably gain some skills, maybe build a relationship, have someone that could be a reference for you. So a smaller engagement. And then you can move, as you've gotten more of those, to more paid retainer work. I think the biggest difference between that entry point in having regular paid retainer work is that you will have a better understanding of the value you bring, and you will be better at messaging it, because there's a lot of need out there. You're just trying to find it, right? And then you can grow your scope and your rates over time. And frankly, the goal is that you're growing with the companies. So the companies should be growing too. So I just want you to be encouraged that you really can make a huge impact. You can design a career you love. You have a ton of clinical expertise. It's really valuable. And it's just about applying it in a new way to a world that most of us don't ever get exposed to. And I really want to try and be a support for you. I do have a Facebook group. I'm not as active as Sharon's group, but the resources on the right QR code, I know I mentioned the archetype guide is on there, and the guide for joining the expert networks. I also, I do have a course. So I really want other doctors to have these pathways. I really want you all to be able to make an impact in the area that you want to make an impact. So we do have CME. It is a 12-week course. We have live sessions. We have a community where people are kind of going through all these things together. We also have some AI tools, and then we have a community for after you finish the course. I did make a special discount code for this group that will be active for the next 2 days. And I just built this AI launch toolkit that's been really, really fun. I've gotten a ton of feedback from people that I give to everyone that's in the course. The idea is, how do we get you going faster to get to the action taking step? So instead of just spending 12 weeks like absorbing all of this stuff and understanding like the lingo and how to put your value proposition, it actually does like an interview with you and brings in a lot of resources, but it'll make you your actual playbook of exactly what your like narrative and your statements need to be. We do a lot of deep research on various companies, and everyone ends up with the outreach tracker of 40 to 70 companies and venture firms. And then I like hold people accountable to be like, how many did you reach out to? Because you really do learn a lot from every single interaction, even if you're just having like friendly networking conversations. So we do have that toolkit for anyone. And then we have our Collective is our ongoing program after the Launchpad, where we're really trying to build a network of venture firms and startups that need advisors so that I can start matching people with opportunities and bringing like pre-qualified leads to the community. I did not mention it here, but I'm just gonna say this, one person mentioned having a startup idea. I am launching my first like 6-month incubator cohort. And I just did a webinar on it last night. So if anyone's interested in that, I can send you a replay, but we are bringing in so many experts and advisors. I feel like so many people opened the door for me. Like I felt what it actually felt like to have executive sponsorship, someone going ahead of me and saying like, listen to her, she has a good idea. And then we were closing like, you know, multi-million-dollar contracts. And I was like, wow, I have never had anyone like really pave the way for me. And I learned a lot working at a private equity firm about de-risking concepts. So if you have any questions about that, I'm happy to answer questions now. I do have a podcast. I interview some really incredible physicians for, you know, if you like to be inspired by some of your peers that are doing really cool things. Some of them are starting companies on the side just because they saw a clinical need for their own practice, and others are, you know, really making incredible changes in the way we care for our patients. And so I'd love for you to listen to my podcast too. So I will.
Alison, that was wonderful. Let's see, guys, what type of questions do you have? Ladies, I should say. Not guys.
Could you put some of those QR codes back up? They kind of went.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Let me go back.
Heidi, nice to see you. Hey, Jennifer, how are you? Nirvana.
Okay. Yes. So on the right, that goes to my main web page, to the resources page. So you should be able to get stuff there. And then if you click around on there, if you're interested in any of the other programs, they're on there too.
Any
so
questions?
I see one question in the chat, Sarah. Hi. I know if we're in some groups together. So how do you choose the terms and conditions you put in your contract? So it's a process. I have to take a sip of water 1 second. So first off, when I'm trying to come to a deal with someone, it really starts with, at the very beginning of the outreach, how you're positioning yourself. Like, it's great to be able to say, like, I am a blank, and I support companies in these ways. I help with, like I said it earlier, I help with growth strategy, go-to-market strategy, and validation studies for companies. So maybe that's how I position myself. And then I want to be able to connect with founders and decision makers who might be looking for those things. I like to tell people, you need to have a menu. Like, if you went to a restaurant and they didn't have a menu, you wouldn't know what to do. And founders have like a million decisions to make. And so when you make it really easy for them to understand, like, does that align with what I need, or does it not align with what I need? And you have to make a lot of offers. You have to say, like, hey, I work with companies on this. Would you be interested in that? And they might say, not right now. And you'd be like, okay, great. Let's stay connected. I've had people come back to me 6 months later and be like, hey, didn't you do this? Because now we're to the point where we need that. So you want to align on scope first. So I generally, when I am meeting with people for the first time, I do a very structured discovery call where, you want to be able to introduce yourself in a clear way, have them introduce themselves and share what they're doing with the company. And you want to ask a series of questions about the company to really get an understanding of what their pain points are and what sorts of things they might need, so that you can then come back to them and offer a proposed set of services that would be valuable for them. And so then you want to define those. So I always ask, like, hey, I do this work. Would you be interested in a proposal? I think it could be valuable to help you, like, grow your product or get in front of more doctors or something like that. And then I always have an AI note taker in my discovery calls, because then I can just focus on asking questions, and then I can process it later, be like, where did you hear they have pain points? They have things that maybe I could contribute value to, knowing what you know about me. And in my first proposal to them, the only thing we're trying to align on is scope, because I want to say, like, hey, this is what I heard you say. I might want to align on scope and general pricing. Like, I could say, I generally do this as a retainer contract, but I don't go into like a million terms. I've seen people write a proposal that's really like, you're just feeling it out, but then you're giving them like an 8-page proposal. You don't want to do that. You want to start with, what is the scope? What is it that they need? And if it's a project, say I start my projects at $3,000 or $5,000, but I could get this done for you in a month. Or I start my retainers at X amount per month, and this would be the scope. So if you can align on those terms, then I have a standard set of contracts that I use, that the terms, the scope, and the rate go in the exhibit. And the terms, they may redline it. So depending on how, I have some clients who have very aggressive legal teams, and others that are like, yeah, that sounds good. So you get like a whole variety. But so the legal terms, like things like mutual indemnification, you want to make sure they're probably going to have like a non-solicit and like they don't want you to, there's an NDA built in. There's a lot of legalese. I generally take, if I'm sending the contract and then they redline it, I will assess it myself. If they send me a contract, I'll put it next to my standard one and be like, where are the differences? And so it's all about having good standard contracts. Hopefully that answered it. Heidi asked about scope of work agreements. It's just so important. It's the most important thing. And I like to align on outcomes. So for instance, one of my clients right now, I'm supporting, like, their goal is to publish a research study on their products. And I have a lot of experience with the particular sort of study that they want to do. And so my scope has to do with like making a plan for the research project and creating a budget and creating the vendor agreements and designing the study and getting an IRB and carrying out the study and writing it. And so it's very clear going into it what success would look like. And then the companies that I work with that are, in my mind, the most functional and successful teams run on EOS. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Entrepreneurial Operating System. And those clients, I've learned a lot from them. And I put in place like a 30, 60, 90-day plan when I start with them. And we talk about the scope, and then we align with a strategy meeting on what exactly they would like to see happen in 30 days, in 60 days, and in 90 days. Not like, oh, we're going to meet with all these people. It's like, what are the outcomes? What is the outcome that they want? And then I have to decide, like, does that seem reasonable? But if you put that planning in up front, it becomes so much more easy to be successful because you know exactly what it takes to do a good job. And so scope is very important. I think it's really important to have a sounding board. I know when I first started consulting, I had found 2 or 3 other physicians who were doing advisory and consulting work. And we had a little group chat that I put everything in there. We all put everything in there. As far as like, hey, like, what do you think about these terms? And what do you think about this? And what should I say about this? And it's just nice to have someone to ask questions to because every situation is unique. Okay. Nirvana Integrative Medicine, 26-year clinical practice in internal medicine, cancer survivor, integrative medicine, have an MPH health policy management. I'm seeing a lot of skill sets here. Looking to become a consultant or advisor or project work that aligns with my core values. That's so exciting. I think you just named like all these different skills that translate in different ways to a lot of different domain expertise. I think it sounds really cheesy to start by being like, you just got to believe that you can. But I feel like the mindset thing is the most foundational thing. I have the most common question I get from people are there opportunities for me in XYZ field or because I'm blank? And it's really coming from this scarcity mindset that like, there just probably aren't that many opportunities for me. And I bring a lot of doctors with me to like health tech conferences and then they walk around and realize there's like literally thousands of companies and they're all like, oh, wow, you're a doctor? Like, wow, like we could use advisors. Like the opportunities are abundant. The navigation of them is not natural for us. Like we just have not lived in this world. And so I just want to encourage you that there are people looking for your skill sets. Heidi, I find it funny that you just asked about business insurance because I just reapplied for my business liability insurance today. You want to get someone local. You want to get just general business liability. You need like errors and omissions policy to do consulting. You need them to understand that you are not practicing medicine because otherwise some insurance companies are like, oh, I don't know, do you need malpractice? So I actually just asked some other advisors and founders in Nashville and somebody gave me a reference, but I have then since gone to my insurance people and be like, hey, I have a student that's in New Jersey. And they're like, they should ask someone in New Jersey. And I'm like, okay, like they don't know anyone in other states. So I would try and tap into your local entrepreneur market to get advice for just general business liability and make sure they know that you are not practicing medicine. You need E&O insurance. And then if you will be handling any like sensitive data, some clients will require that you have like cybersecurity. Sarah, where do you find these opportunities? So a lot of them you make them, but when you ask like where can you do your outreach, I do like 3 ways. So one, teach people how to do the cold outreach on LinkedIn, which feels weird, but so low risk. Like it costs nothing. You can't mess it up. Like you can't embarrass yourself. It's totally fine. And you can get clear on your messaging. And you're not selling anything. You're literally just trying to connect with other people and encourage them. Everybody wants encouragement. And so the second one is your own professional society conferences. So when you go to like the AAP meeting or something, realize that every single person on that exhibit hall has paid like 10 or 20 or $50,000 to get in front of people like you. So instead of going around and just trying to get the free swag, you can do that too, but go around and pitch yourself as an advisor. You'd be shocked. I've gotten so many paid opportunities out of just walking around the exhibit hall at the AAP meeting, and just talking to people at the booth and telling them what I do and then give them free advice. Be like, hey, have you ever thought about growing your business by blah, blah, blah? Like anything that comes to your mind that comes from your clinical expertise. And if you're able to kind of
ball for her and she threw it under the
exchange your ideas. I mean, that's what conferences are for. And then the big one I would say is going to a health tech conference. I go to health. I'm going to health in Europe. If anyone wants to go to Amsterdam with me, I have a special physician rate, and that's in June. Health is in November. That's where we're launching all of our incubator companies this year. And then Vive is another one that I recommend. It's the same ecosystem, but it's in February. And okay, how do you handle the disconnect between your recommendations without the company team implementing with fidelity? I don't work with people that I don't trust. I don't work with people who I wouldn't want to put my name on their product. That's why I said I told you I do start with more internal work because I want to make sure they're mission aligned with me. I do pro bono work too. I work with nonprofits. I work with advocacy groups. And I have yet to end up with a group that I feel like is doing something wrong, or I think we have a lot of mistrust of the sort of private equity space, which is for good reason. But my firm was great. Like I really respect the way that they build businesses and the way they respect clinical expertise. There are bad players out there and I don't work with them. So I think you have to have a good understanding of your values and how to assess other people against those values and exit a relationship if they don't align with your values. And that's why your contracting is also important. I think I got all the questions. Hit the nail. Seems challenging to connect the dots. I would love to support you, even if it's as simple as listening to my podcast. It sounds challenging, but you're really good at learning stuff. And so I think that that's hopefully a core takeaway is that I hope you feel empowered. I hope you feel, I mean, I am literally just a pediatrician. I never expected to work in venture. I told you at the beginning of this, my career goal was to sleep at night every night. Like that was when I was going to know I hit the jackpot of like total life design was that I sleep at night every night. I really do. I don't work nights anymore. So.
It's been wonderful. Thank you so much for this talk. Any other last minute questions? Yeah, it was great. You guys have her contact. Alison, if you want, go ahead and put maybe your email or however you want to get in the chat as well. Jennifer, it's so nice to see you. And Heidi, it's been a while. everybody.
And I am in the Facebook group too. So, and I'll try and drop a comment if you post this on there. But whoever just said something at the beginning about having a startup idea, definitely reach out to me. I'm really excited about this new founder program that we're running. Yeah, if you want to launch a company at the health conference in November, it's going to be pretty cool.
Good context, Alison. Thanks so much again for doing this. I can't say what plan I'm with, but I am with a Medicaid plan in New York State, and we use, Imagine.
Oh, you do? Okay. We are in New York now, and I will tell you, like, one of the most exciting things for me is that we are now back in Missouri. When I say back in Missouri, because Imagine wasn't ever in Missouri, but that's where I started. That's where my program was. I literally, my entire team that got laid off on May 15th of 2020, as soon as we got Imagine funding, I went and I found every single one of them and I hired them. They're now like in leadership, and I'm like, y'all got to come over here and rebuild it, you know? And I've told them, I was like, now that we're in Missouri, I'm like, go find those kids. Like, tell me the day that we have one of our original kids back. Like, it was, you know, a 4-year journey. But yeah, that's cool that you know of Imagine in New York. I know we entered New York a couple years, about last year. So
yeah.
Thank you guys. Nice to meet you. I'll see you on the Facebook group.
Hi guys. Thanks so much. See ya. Bye-bye. Thanks, Alison.